My name is Paul Hemphill, and I'd like to welcome you to our webinar this evening, which is the College Admissions Essay. And my very special guest this evening is Alan Gelb, who is the author of the best-selling Conquering the College Admissions Essay in 10 Steps, and the complete student achieving success in college and beyond, and many other books and articles. He is a marketing communications consultant who works with colleges and universities across the country, and as a college essay coach, he works with students around the world. And I am Paul Hemphill. I'm a college admissions and financial aid specialist, and I am the college admissions expert for College Parenting Magazine, whose website I'll give you at the end of this webinar. So without further ado, Alan, welcome. Glad to have you on board, and so we'll get right to it. So go right ahead.
Thank you, Paul. Good evening, everybody, parents, students. You're probably just starting to get involved with the college admissions process if you're have just graduated your junior year. And chances are you haven't really started to think yet about the college admissions essay, so I'm going to sort of start you out on that tonight. And I want to first talk for a minute about why the college admissions essay is as important as it is. In today's very competitive admissions environment, your personal statement or your college admissions essay, those terms are used interchangeably, is more important than ever. In a sense, this is your interview. It's your chance to shine in the eyes of the admissions officer who reads it. He or she will form some kind of opinion of you as a person and as a writer, and that opinion may determine which stack your application lands on. In fact, the essay has become really a central part of the entire application process. A survey recently done by the National Association for College Admission Counseling ranked the essay as one of the most important factors in determining admissions to schools, right after your grades, test scores, and class rank, and ahead of recommendations and extracurricular activities. Perhaps even more significantly, these admissions counselors name the essay as the most important tip factor. That is the thing that can really tip your application in your favor. And all that makes sense if you think about it. When you apply to a selective college or university, you'll be competing against many other students who have terrific grades and test scores. That's a given. Every one of you will have glowing recommendations from your teachers. You're all going to have a shining list of extracurricular activities and honors and awards and so forth. The essay is the one part of the process that you can make totally your own, unique and memorable. In a sense, it's your thumbprint. No two essays are alike, after all, unless you happen to buy them from an essay service, which I'm going to tell you not to do. The point is that you have the chance to write an essay that will serve as the perfect expression of who you are and how you function in the world. You can captivate and astound your audience, reduce bored, jaded readers to tears, and make them want to meet you the moment you arrive on campus in the fall. So when you think about it, the essay really is a great opportunity. In a moment, I'm going to share with you my 2 top tips for how to approach this big assignment. But first, I want to state the 2 cardinal rules that I always put out there as a jumping off point for the students I work with. So, Paul, may we have the slide?
Excuse me a second, Alan. I think we got a little glitch here, but I'll get right back to where we need to be. Sorry about this.
Right. Keep going. Okay, there you are. Oh. Okay, next one.
All right.
Okay, so first cardinal rule is you must have complete ownership of your essay. No one should be allowed ever to write your essay for you. And regrettably, there are essay services out there that actually do the writing for the students, or at least, the lion's share of the job. And not only is this practice highly unethical, but it's also really wrong-headed. No one can write a personal essay for you as effectively as you can for yourself. So if anyone offers to do such a thing for you, your mother, father, sister, brother, friend, or, heaven forbid, a hired gun, just say no, okay? Your essay needs to present your authentic voice. And if you work with a college essay coach, and I am a college essay coach, make sure that you both understand that. Next. And rule number 2 is to be prepared to work at the process. Writing doesn't come easily to most people. I'm a professional writer. It doesn't come easily to me. Even those students I've worked with who are excellent writers often freeze in the face of this assignment. Why is that? Well, one problem is that there's so much at stake here. Also, the essay is often dealt with toward the end of the college application process when you're kind of exhausted from all the demands being made on you, and maybe you and your parents have been sort of at each other's throats at that point. And also, overcoming resistance to writing is an ongoing problem that even professional writers have to conquer over and over again. So it's good to get into this assignment with number 2 in mind, knowing that you have to really work at it in order to achieve your product. You have to stay with it even when you're feeling like you'll never get it right. And the more focused you become, the better your chances for success will be. Okay, now let's turn to the top 10 tips for writing your college application essay. Next. The first is to give yourself time. You know, a good piece of writing rarely happens overnight. It could take weeks. Plan for it. I always tell students that I work with that they should allot at least 3 weeks for this. There's kind of an arc. There's the discovery part of it, where you're going to sort of wonder about what kind of topic makes sense for you to write about, and that's going to be involving asking yourself questions, going back, letting things sit for a while. And then there's the actual writing process, the drafting, and so forth. And in amongst all that, there may very likely be a good deal of procrastination, which is a topic that I talk about at some length in my book, and I offer some tips about how to overcome that procrastination. So again, give yourself time for this. It's not going to happen overnight. It's not going to happen in a week. Okay, next. Okay, now I'm talking about the phase of asking yourself questions. A useful exercise that I use when I'm coaching students is to ask them to reply to a list of questions which appears in my book. There's about 20 questions in that book. And they're kind of surprising, and they may not feel like something that you're used to. They're questions like, what's been the hardest thing in my life? Have I ever felt the thrill of discovery? When has my body and my mind felt like they're in perfect harmony? What keeps me up at night? What have I ever felt pure rage? These questions, which I encourage my students to answer very kind of viscerally, quickly from the gut, in just a sentence or two. These are just really kind of just to make things come out. And often I see things in these answers that my students don't see. There are seeds for essays in there. So if you do have my book, I recommend that you spend a particular amount of time with those questions. Next.
Oh, Alan, we have a little surprise this evening. For the first 5 people who have showed up to the webinar this evening, we're going to award, free of charge, Susan Schaffer's organization, The Key to a Successful College Admissions Process. And as you can see by the graphic, if you're not organized when you get into this college process, you're in a big heap of trouble. So congratulations to those 5 people. You will receive the 37-page PDF file soon after this webinar. Okay, Alan?
Well, that's really relevant to what I'm talking about as well, because organization is going to be an important part of the job of getting this essay done. Keep yourself on track. So another tip that I want to share with you is to definitely not blow your own trumpet. Some people think that this college admissions essay is an invitation to talk about something that you're very proud of. I see essays that start out with things like, as president of the...
The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
That's something I should think about?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Okay, there was an announcement, but I didn't get it.
Okay.
I see essays that start out with statements like, as president of the junior class, I was able to bring soda machines into the cafeteria. That's great that you were able to do that, and conceivably there may be some aspect of that experience that you could explore in an essay, but you can't just take the essay as an opportunity to lay out your achievements as if it's a resume. You really want to create a narrative. And so that's what brings us to our next slide, which is understanding the elements of a narrative. So a narrative, I'm using that word interchangeably with a story. And I just want to stop here for a moment to talk about the importance of stories in human life. From the beginning of human experience, stories have been what's really held people together, and it's been the thing around the fire that sort of has begun to create culture for people, and it still has a powerful hold on all of us. We love to hear good stories, and that very beleaguered admissions counselor who's reading hundreds and hundreds of essays, some of which may be about that soda machine in the cafeteria, that person is going to really light up when he or she comes across a good story, because there's a human connection in that story, and that's what you're looking for here. You're looking to make a connection with that person. So to be able to tell a good story, to be able to construct a good narrative, you have to understand what the elements of that narrative are. And for your purposes, I've distilled those elements down to 4. Next slide. The first element is what I'm calling the once. And by that I mean that your story is going to be taking place in a specific period of time, a point of time. If you think about stories that you've read in your life, they start somewhere and they end somewhere. The famous line that opens up many fairy tales of once upon a time, that's the beginning. The line that opens up Genesis in the Bible is in the beginning. The line that opens up Charles Dickens's Tale of Two Cities, it was the best of times, it was the worst of times. These are points that these stories begin at, and they're also good beginnings. So just like those stories, your story will be taking place in a specific point of time, and you're going to have to figure out the best place to start and to end. And you don't have that much room to work with here. You have 500 words. 500 words is not a lot of real estate to use for telling a really good story. You're very limited here. So you have to be very savvy about how you use that space. And that means that if you're going to be telling me a story about your summer experience building a hospital for native peoples in Botswana, let's say, you're not going to get started about with describing how you are packing your suitcase in your room back in Albany. Okay, you're not going to be getting on the plane for Botswana. You're going to have to find some point right there where you can effectively start your story. And there's also the issue of ending your story, because a lot of stories that I see when I first see them really kind of peter out. They don't know where to go. So the once, that point of time, is the first challenge we have in constructing the narrative. Next. The second element is what I call the ordinary versus the extraordinary. By that I mean that something has to happen in your story, okay? If I was just to say, I went to the store today and I bought, soap and detergent and milk and bread and cotton balls and dog food, you may already be asleep, right? But when I introduced something out of the ordinary and then I went into the parking lot and my bag broke, you start waking up, okay? Some conflict is introduced into the story and some inciting event that sets the story on its course, and that's when something's happening. That's when the reader understands that a story has been set into action. You're driving along, happy as can be, and suddenly your brakes lock up, okay? You're getting ready to go on a date. You're thinking about, how nice you're going to look and, how important it is for you to look good because it's the first time you've gone out with this person, and suddenly you get a nasty shaving nick, okay? These are incidents that can set off a narrative, and you have to be sure that something is actually happening in your story, okay? Next slide, please. So I alluded to the issue of conflict, and here we have a slide about tension and conflict. We want to see our hero, which is you, because you're going to be the hero of the story. The story, this college admissions essay should not be about your grandfather, even if he's an incredible man, or your father, if he's an incredible man, or your mother, if she's an incredible woman. It shouldn't be about them, although it could be exploring them, but it really has to be about you as you see them, okay? So you're the hero of the story, and you as the hero have to overcome certain obstacles. If it's a story about your grandfather, it may be the obstacle of how can you live up to the example of your amazing grandfather? Will you ever be as big as he is? Okay, so that's the kind of conflict that you might explore. These conflicts can be big or small, internal, external, and you know what? They can be full of comedy also. I mean, comedy is conflict. When you slip on a banana peel and the rest of the world laughs, that's conflict. You've fallen, on your tush. Okay, so keep that in mind also. You shouldn't worry about, you can do comedy in this assignment. If you think you're amusing, and if other people think you're amusing, it might be a good place to go. Okay, next. And now we have the point. Very important. Your reader has to understand why you chose to tell this story. It has to be that aha moment that you're providing at the end. Oh, so that's what this is all about. I understand. I understand something about this person now. I understand why this person told the story and why she asked me to read it, and why I spent the time doing it, because I learned something about that person. And, it's not a monumental thing that I learned, but I learned something about it, and that interests me, and I maybe even learned something a little bit about the human condition. It's not impossible, actually, for a reader to learn something about the human condition from an essay that you're going to write for this purpose. Some of the students who write these essays that I work with actually move me to tears, and I do feel like I learned something from them. Okay, so those are the 4 elements of the narrative, and of course in my book you'll find these discussed in far more detail. And now we are going on to the process. So we are getting ready to draft, and I'm sure from your English classes you have been spent time over the last few years of high school understanding and appreciating the importance of drafting, and I want to reinforce that because it really lies at the very heart of writing. Writing really is about rewriting. An interviewer once asked, the great novelist Ernest Hemingway, how much rewriting he did, and Hemingway said that that really depended. In the case of his novel Farewell to Arms, he said he rewrote the last page 39 times before he was satisfied. And the interviewer asked if there was some technical problem there, something that stumped him, and Hemingway replied, no, it was all about getting the words right. And that's what it's going to be about for you, about getting the words right. And that takes a lot of patience and a lot of discipline. And you need to know that there's a structure around your words, that each word leads to another word, that each sentence leads to another word, that another sentence, that each paragraph flows into the next, and that all requires a lot of work. So that's why I tell my students to plan on 3 or 4 drafts and a polish. And you know what? I deal with lots of different kinds of students. Some are at the very high end of academic achievement, and they have aspirations to go to the very top schools, and some of my students are not at that level, and they struggle a lot more with academics. And there's no real correlation between the kinds of jobs that one or the other does on this assignment. Sometimes those very achieving students get a little freaked out by it, and they get a little sloppy on this assignment, and the other ones can focus on it more. So whoever you are, you really need to make sure that you're putting the work in and doing the drafts. Okay, next. Proofreading. This assignment has to be absolutely perfect. Now, I know there's nothing in life that is absolutely perfect, and chances are when I say that a stray comma or a missing period will happen here, and that's not going to keep you out of a college. But you're going to want to make sure that you don't have any, that you can catch as many mistakes as you can, and because what does a mistake do? It holds up a reader. When I see a comma in the wrong place, because I'm a writer and I'm sensitive to commas, it holds me up. When I see a spelling mistake, it holds me up. It distracts me. And that's what's going to happen to you with the person who's reading your essays. So you want to avoid that. You really can't afford to do that. There's too much at stake here. So I have a bunch of suggestions in my book, a bunch of tips about how to proofread more effectively. And chances are you haven't seen some of these ideas because some of them are a little quirky. There are ideas like, I include ideas like blowing your text up to 16-point type, for instance, which environmentally is not correct because it's going to use up more paper, but it's going to allow you to see things differently. You absolutely have to print out what you do. You cannot rely on reading it only on the computer because you're so used to only reading things on the computer that your eyes are not necessarily trained to read them a different way for this purpose. You also are going to want to maybe do things like read only for commas and only for periods and that kind of system. You may also try reading the sentences backwards, start at the end and go towards the front. So those are some of the kinds of ideas that you'll see in the book. Okay, next. Okay, then we want to be able to slot in some time, which is why I talk about this as being a 3 to 4 week arc of time. We want to slot in some time for you to be able to have some other readings. I'm sure your guidance counselor, your English teacher, they're going to request that you show your essay to them before it goes out. You may also want to tap into a parent or a friend or whoever. You may have a sense of people in your life who actually enjoy reading, and those are very good people to go to. If you have an aunt or a grandmother or a grandfather who likes books, give that person your essay to read, okay? But keep in mind also that good critics may be as hard to find as good writers. So, you have to be a little discriminating about who you give it to, and you also have to, at a certain point, question the kind of feedback you're getting. If it doesn't, just don't accept it for what it's worth. And, you can also read more in my book about that issue. Next. Okay. Well, that last slide, I can tell you what it said. It said put it to bed. Because after a certain point, enough is enough, and you can really worry a piece of writing to death, and it gets counterproductive. And when you finally let go of it, just give yourself a reward. I don't know, whatever it is for you, a bike ride, a video game, an ice cream sundae, whatever you think you've earned, because the fact is you've really done something that's very hard. You produced a piece of personal writing that's as good as you could possibly have made it, and for that you do deserve a reward. And so now I'm going to open this up for questions.
Alan, we've gotten some great questions in this evening while you've been talking, and I'd like to start out with my question, and that is you touched upon the issue of comedy. And I, for one, have found that it's very difficult for a 17-year-old to communicate to, let's say, a 25 or a 30-year-old reader on the level that a 30-year-old would appreciate from a 17-year-old. Do you at all discourage students from even touching on the aspect of being comical in their essays?
No, as I was saying, Paul, I really feel like some people are very funny, And actually, humor is a wonderful quality that we all, really kind of cherish and admire. And if you have the capacity to write in a humorous vein, then you've probably already been identified for being able to do that.
Right.
And and you might try it, you know. I would probably advise going in two directions. Try a comic, a humorous one, and try a more serious one, because even though I love certain essays that have humor in them, it is hard to pull it off, and you want to have a little insurance, a little backup in case nobody else is smiling.
Right. I'd like to get to some of these other great questions. The first one is, what's the absolute worst mistake that you've seen in an essay?
Well, the one that really gets under my skin, and I showed you a slide about it, is that one about blowing your own trumpet. Mm. And why do I not like that? Because you know, it has a kind of falseness to it. You know, imagine sitting at a party with somebody who's going on telling you about how good he or she is. You're not going to like that person. You really aren't, you know? And that same quality easily comes through in essays that are striving to do that. So I just tell anybody who's doing that, look, you know, calm down, back off, start again. You're a person, you know, you have depth, you have dimensions. Go back to the drawing board and find some of them, okay?
Okay. What are, or are there any taboo subjects to write about?
That's a good question. I generally say no, there aren't. Because, you know, my philosophy is really that if a student comes to me and he or she is really intent on writing something, it's not my job to stand in that person's way, and there's some validity to the fact that you know, a strong impulse should be acted on when it comes to writing. That said, there have been a couple of instances where I have alerted the writer to a potential pitfall. For instance, let me think of an example. Like eating disorders, let's say, okay? You know, if you suffer from an eating disorder, and many people unfortunately do in our society, that is an extraordinary hardship, it's an extraordinary conflict, and dealing with it requires extraordinary bravery, and I salute people who are, you know, fighting that fight. However, you know, eating disorders are also something that universities and colleges may be wary of, because unfortunately it is getting to sort of epidemic proportions. So I just say, as a practical matter, that may not be the flag you want to raise. But there are very few things actually that fall into that category, and you know, I have students or parents coming to me and saying, you know, oh, somebody tells me you're not supposed to ever write about a sports injury, or you're not ever supposed to write about a pet, or about a death in the family, or a death of a pet or something, you know. And you know what? My own son wrote an essay about the death of his pet, and you know, it was terrific, you know. So it's really, you know, there's a saying, there are no new stories, you know. I mean, Shakespeare borrowed stories from people. And it's really, there's really some truth to that. So it's really as much about how you spin it and how you make something new that's relevant here.
For some reason, my mechanism was for selecting the slides was overcoming or skipping some. There's one here at the very end which I was very intrigued with. A piece of writing can suffer from too much worrying over it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, sort of worrying it as sort of picking at a scab is kind of what I'm describing here. You know, you keep like, or pulling the thread out of a sweater, you know.
What's the hardest thing about doing an essay, Alan?
Say that again, Paul?
What's the hardest thing about writing an essay?
Well, you know, it's really, different things are hard for different people. Just writing personally can be very hard for some people. It's actually hard for many people, or even for most people. You know, you're being asked to put out something about yourself. So it's sort of like looking into a mirror, and or having a bright light shown on you, and it's intimidating to do that. It requires bringing some insight onto yourself, and so that's a very difficult aspect of what you're being asked to do here, that kind of self-examination. But you know, maybe the hardest technical part of the assignment is the beginning and the end. That's always, I mean, that's the hardest thing for me whenever I write a piece. If I'm writing a brochure for a college, and I do a lot of that, you know, a lot of what's called the view books, the things you catch from your college visits, are written by people like me. And, you know, for me to get a good start on that is very hard, you know. For you to get a good start on your essay is going to be very hard. You're going to have to play with that quite a bit.
So the first statement has to be one that really grabs the reader.
Yeah, and one of the techniques that I often bring to writers' attentions as a way of starting is, and this may be familiar to students from their English classes, it's in media res, which is Latin for in the middle of things. Mm-hmm. So given the fact that you have a very, very tight quarters to work with here, 500 words, you're going to want to stay away from what we call backstory, you know. If you're writing about, you know, how you crashed the car, let's say, you know, first time you went out driving, I don't need to know about the fact that, you know, your father gave you driving lessons, and, you know, there's a lot of stuff I don't need to know, and those kinds of things often work their way into these essays. Mm-hmm. I say to the writer, hey, guess what? You can take out the first 3 paragraphs of your essay and start right there. And they go, hey, right, I could do that, you know? And that technique that I call it media res is even a more dramatic way of doing things, because it really plunges you right into the action. So what I'm talking about there is things like the elevator cable broke, you know?
Wow.
Wait, stop, don't go there. You could start with dialogue too. That's very arresting, you know? Okay. These kinds of openings really like grab the reader.
Yeah.
And they're effective.
Does the ending have to be equally as powerful as the first one, or does the ending statement have to be a summary of what you want the reader to remember?
No, it shouldn't be a summary at all. And it's equally important to the beginning, but it doesn't need to have the same kind of grab to it that I'm describing for the opening. The ending, unless it's some kind of surprise ending, let's say, which could work also, that's kind of unusual. But most of the writers I work with, what they want to go for at the end is a kind of resonance, a kind of spooling out of meaning, you know. So you read about an incident, and then you see how that writer is kind of extrapolating out to apply that incident, that event to his or her life. You know, it's brought meaning to his or her life, and in so doing, the reader has a similar kind of insight. It's a kind of resonance that plays out. And, you know, if you read the sample essays that I provide in the appendix to my book, you can get a sense of what I mean, you know, the kinds of endings that sort of leave you with a kind of, yeah, that's meaningful, you know?
Some other great questions we have this evening. What if I can't find anything to write about?
Well, what do I say to people that ask me that question?
Yeah.
I say, yes, you can. I say there's always something to write about, and it's really a matter of digging. A lot of times people say to me, I'm not really very interesting. And I say, yes, you are. Everybody's interesting. You just have to do the work to find what's interesting in you. And that's where I go back to the idea of conflict and the process of answering those questions, those exploratory questions, because that statement is really a cop-out. You know, it's fear. It's making yourself inadequate for no reason, and I don't spend a lot of time with that.
What is the single most important rule about writing the essay?
I would say the one that I really want to sort of imprint on people, maybe even tattoo on them, is to own your essay. And that's what I started out with, because I can't warn you enough against you know, settling for something that's not yours. You know, I want to drive home the point that this essay is really about making this human connection with your reader. As I said, you know, I'm trying to stress that, you know, this is your interview. This is your chance to have that admissions counselor say, John Jones, I understand a little bit about him now, you know? And that's an invaluable opportunity. And if you're going to get somebody, you know, if you're going to pay somebody $100 who has a menu of essays that you can choose from, and if you think that's going to work, you know, it's really not. You know, it looks canned, and it is canned, and it feels canned. Doesn't smell, doesn't feel like a real essay.
I see a question here that really has my attention. What little mistakes drive you crazy when you read an essay?
Okay, I can think of a few of those. I'm going to mention two of them, and I have a lot more in my book, but the two that are my particular, you know, bamboo under the fingernail, exclamation points. I have a fair number of writers I've worked with who feel like if they put an exclamation point after a sentence, it lends it some significance, you know. And I tell them that the only place that you can use an exclamation point is, and where all exclamation points are meant to be used, are after an exclamation. Ouch, wait, fire. These are where you can use exclamation points. Otherwise, they're really silly, and they just, you know, look like something that you're doing to pump up some kind of energy, and it just pulls the energy out of a piece. Yeah, the other kind of writing tip that I can give you right now, and this is a good one to know, is to really stay away from adverbs after the word said. I said, he said. Let those stand on their own. Don't say, I said quickly, I said ebulliently, I said amusingly. Those are really deadening, and they're going to make your writing feel like clay.
Makes sense. Is there anything, this is interesting, this sounds like a student who's working on it right now. Is there anything I should be doing right now to prepare for my essay writing?
Well, yeah, there's quite a few things. I mean, the summer before your senior year is an ideal time for you to get started on this assignment, because you know what the crush of senior year, first semester senior year is going to be like for you. And as I said, you have to give yourself time. So, and I actually had an article about this, Paul, on the New York Times website in May, and I offered juniors a number of suggestions for things they could be doing in the summer of their before their senior year. One of the things that I suggested they do is to set aside some time in which they can clear their heads, because you need to sort of carve out a quiet time to do some writing. And I know that writers, you know, young people are very tied to their gadgets and their electronics, and I respect that. And I'm not a young person, and I know I sound like an old geezer if I question that. But you know, it really is hard to hear your internal voices when you're doing that. So trust me, and you know, turn those things off for a while, and sit somewhere quiet, whether it's the library or the park or the roof of your building, and let yourself hear yourself, you know. Even when you're answering those exploratory questions, give yourself some quiet and some space. Another thing you can be doing, going back to what I said before, is to ask yourself those exploratory questions. I give you a list of them in my book, but you can come up with your own exploratory questions if you think you can. Also, I think it's a really good idea to get into the habit right now in the summer of writing it down. Carry around a pencil and a pad, a BlackBerry, your iPhone, whatever you want to do, and whatever you can use to make a note, but have that available to you because you don't want to lose things. There's a real rule around writing is that if you don't write it down, you lose it. And I can't tell you how many times I kicked myself for not writing something down. Shall I keep going with the?
Yeah, we have another one final question. Got some great questions here. Can you describe the process that you go through when you're coaching a student on an essay?
Sure. Well, the way I work with a student is that we, as I say, it's a 3 to 4 week process. I start with the brainstorming. Sometimes a student comes to me with a topic already in mind, and I actually find that a bit more difficult because I got to say that those seldom sort of work out. And but I'm open to it, but it seldom works out. So usually the first thing that happens is that we go through the brainstorming process. Might take about a week. And then it's, then we're in the trenches of going from draft to draft. And during that time, I'm totally available to the writer. We usually work by email. And I send back very detailed notes on their drafts. Now, I want to differentiate what I do with what I'm warning you against. I don't write for people. I might say, hey, this is not a good word. This might be a better word for you. I might fix a sentence, but I'm always telling the students that, I'm not a 17-year-old kid. I'm a whole lot older than that. So if I was to write for you, it wouldn't sound like you, and it would sound like me, and that would be a big mistake.
Right.
But I can really tell you what you're not doing right, and I can lead you to where you need to go, and I do that very, very specifically. I work as an editor. I don't work as a teacher with my students, although I have to say that in working as an editor with them, they learn a lot. So there really is a teaching experience going on there. But what I mean when I say I'm an editor is that when I work as a teacher, and I have taught, at various points in my life in school settings, it takes a lot more time. I let the student take a lot more time to get to where that student needs to go to. In this instance, I work as an editor, and the first time they see the editing from me, it can be a shock because there's more red on the page than black, But you know what, Paul? When I send something into a professional editor, when I'm getting published by a publisher and an editor is working on my stuff, that often happens to me also.
Right. Right.
It's kind of, and I can be as good an editor as I can be for somebody else. I may not necessarily be that good for myself. So
yeah, good point.
It's a very different process.
Yeah, I just remember in writing my 2 books, the amount of red I would see on a page, and I would say, wait a minute, my ego is getting hurt. So, very, very interesting. I wanted to ask you if there is, do you have a point of view relative to an essay being in sync with some other aspect of the student's brand or his identity that he wants to get across to the reader? In other words, let's use an example where I might have a student who is a long-distance runner, and he wants to write an essay about the sweat and toil of long-distance running. Would you discourage that, or would you tell the student that in order for the college to get more of a picture of who you are, you ought to be writing about something else and let your track coach talk about your running in your letter of recommendation or something?
Yeah, I do tend to follow that philosophy, I think, because
to be in sync or to be out of
To pick another dimension of
okay, yeah,
and explore that in the main essay. You know, as you mentioned, you know, you're going to have most likely you're going to be asked to write a short essay, maybe a couple hundred words about your favorite or your most important activity, let's say, and that may be where you talk about running or something like that. And you know, we all do have a lot of dimensions to us. So none of us are simply a runner or a musician or an actor or a you know, computer scientist. We all have other dimensions to who we are. However, that said, as I said, I don't like to lay taboos down. You know, so if a runner says to me, "Well, I really want to write something about running," then I say, "Okay, but you know, let's see what else you can do about running. Don't just do this square on. You know, don't tell me, oh, I'm a long distance runner and this is very important to me. You know, maybe there's something else you can. You know, maybe you can use the running as a framework for some other kind of meditation, you know, whether it's about your family or about some aspect of learning. You know, when I run, and I happen to be a runner, a lot of stuff goes through my mind, you know. So that could be a nice way of combining these threads in your life. You know, the running is a framework, but it gives you also a opportunity to reflect on something else, you know.
Yeah, the other thing I wanted to mention too was in the common application, lots of schools will ask to write that 150-word essay that basically comes down to, why do you want to attend our college? Do you see any particular huge mistakes that are made in those little essays?
I don't see any huge mistakes, and I do work on those with students as well. Here and there, if they ask me to, and really what I strive for here, it's a very different process than we go through with the main essay, because that's really pulling something out from inside of you, you know. The other essay is really more, you know, the one you're talking about, you know, why you want to go to University of Michigan or whatever, is really making an argument, you know. You want to sort of make sure that you have all your points in a row there, and you're being very articulate, and the points need to be important. So, like, one of the things I tell people is that when they go on a college visit, make sure you have your little pad with you, or your BlackBerry or whatever you're using, you know, because you want to use that to record your thoughts and impressions, so you have something tangible to work with when you get home and you start working on that question, that essay, 5 months later, you know?
Right.
You know, if I can start an essay, if you can start an essay off as to why you want to go to the University of Michigan, let's say, and you can conjure up some place on campus that felt very meaningful to you during your visit,
right?
That's powerful, you know. So that's where writing comes in, and it can be an important tool at every point in this process.
Oh. Alan, this has been a fascinating listen this evening, and I really have enjoyed it. Is there? I'd love to have you talk some more. We do have some more time if you want to add a few more things.
Well, let me think about that for a second. You know, one question that a lot of people ask me, I don't have too much more to add, but I'm just thinking, like, one thing that a lot of people ask me is, you know, what do I do if I get absolutely stuck, you know? And in response to that, I say, well, you know, first thing you do is take a deep breath and, you know, tell yourself that you can do this and you can. But then I also have a little trick that I like to share with students, which is that, you know, play a little trick on your mind, okay? So, you know, start writing this thing as if it's an email or a text or whatever you're most comfortable with to a friend, you know? And that might be something that'll just loosen it up for you, you know? So students have found that to be quite helpful, and I just want to kind of you know, end my formal presentation with that one remark. And I also want to just also say that, and this is something that I did mention in that Times piece that I had back in May, I want to tell students to enjoy themselves with this, okay? Right. These times during the summer, these are warm, feel-good months, and that makes it easier to relax. And approaching the college admissions essay with less anxiety is really, it's really a good thing. So, you know, it would really be extremely beneficial if you were to view this assignment not as a really ghastly task that you have to do, really as a creative act, you know? Exactly. And in that vein, you know, you'll want to commit yourself to the work, and you'll want to accept the idea that your essay will evolve through a series of drafts, and allow yourself to take some pleasure in that process. Because writing really can be extremely pleasurable. And, you know, maybe one benefit of this whole assignment is that you're going to, in some way, connect with the joy of writing, and that's going to come in handy as you go on with your life.
Alan, it's been a great evening, and I really have enjoyed this, and I can see where all the attendees have stayed right to the end. That's quite unusual for a lot of webinar guests, and you've just held everybody's attention, and I really appreciate it. You certainly have held my attention. And what I'd like to tell the viewers at this point, as you have been looking at the page for the last 10 minutes or so, at the bottom of the page, you can go to this address and you can purchase Alan's book by going to that website address. And while you're there, look around and you'll see some of Alan's compatriots who are also in the college business. And but you definitely want to focus in on getting Alan's book, because this is really a book of substance, and if you get it, it's going to help your student tremendously. And one of the things I liked about the last comment that you made, Alan, is that the timing, which is now, is ideal for writing the college essay. So, Alan, is there anything else you want to add before we go?
Yeah, well, I just want to mention also, Paul, that students can also check out my website, which is conqueringthecollegeessay.com, in which
I'm sorry, say that again. It's
conqueringthecollegeessay.com.
Okay.
And there you'll find some more of the sort of theory that I'm talking about. And it also connects, as does my Amazon page, with my blog, where I write frequently about the essays that about the issues that I've been talking about tonight.
Oh, excellent! So you've got a blog that the students can tap into right away.
Exactly. Yeah. And I want to thank you for the opportunity for speaking tonight. And
our pleasure. We hope to have you back again some other time, Alan.
And I wish you all good luck and write great essays.
Thank you, Alan. Good night, everyone.
Good night.